have you ever struggled with not knowing what to do? Have you ever struggled with not knowing which decision you need to make out of the two? Well, see, when I was in college, I was taking this class where we had these projects that we had to present, and they overlapped over test days, and so we still had to take tests. But one of these projects that we did took a really long time, and it went over a test day. So the professor was like, you know what? I'm just going to send the test home with you guys. Just open it. You'll have an hour to take it, fill out a Scantron, bring it back, done, bada bing, bada boom, all done. And then we took it, and we left the class, and one of my classmates opened it. Now, I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about the fact that when he opened it, he was looking at the test, and the test had all the answers on it. And then everybody was freaking out, and so they opened their test too. Every single one of us had an answer sheet for a test. The answers were on there. He accidentally copied the answer key instead of the actual test. And so I was faced with this dilemma right here where I could go and let everybody get a perfect score or a somewhat of a great score, or I could go tell the professor what happened. See, I had these two options: do the right thing or do the thing that helps me in the long run. And so what would you do? That's a difficult decision. How would you figure out how to solve something like that? And so one of the things that I noticed when we're thinking about how to do the right thing is that doing the right thing isn't obvious. It's not as clear day process where we know, hey, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, or hey, this is what I'm not supposed to be doing, so I'm going to choose that one. It's not clear. It's not easy. I'm not saying it is at all. The other thing is that doing the right thing is possibly going to cost us something. It's going to cost us on some level. It could cost you your time. It may require you to sacrifice your time. It may require you to sacrifice your finances. It may require you to sacrifice a lot. You may lose something in the end of it, but doing the right thing is probably worth it in the end, wouldn't you think? And the other thing that I noticed, that doing the right thing is complicated. Nobody said that doing the right thing has a great outcome. It's not a rewarding thing to us. It doesn't feel like it's going to be great. It could be like you have one best friend and another best friend, and someone says, you must choose. Well, this best friend has great personality and a great charisma, and you want to hang out with them. And this other best friend has cool parents, and you want to hang out with them because they have a pool. You know, how do you choose between the two? And it's complicated. It's not supposed to be easy. And by the way, you shouldn't have to choose between your friends. That's not what I'm saying here. But what do we do when we don't know what to do? Most of the time, we're deer in headlights. We freeze. A girl comes up to you guys and she's like, do you like me? And you're like, I like turtles. That's your response. That's your reaction. If something difficult comes up, you say, my name's Jeff. You know, sometimes these problems are simple. Sometimes these problems are really difficult, like super difficult. And so remember Joseph? Remember last week we talked about Joseph. He was being carried away in a caravan to Egypt. He was sold into slavery, right? Didn't look so good. But when we finished that passage, we noticed that God blessed him. God was with him. Remember that? And so everything's going really good for Joseph right now, like super good, okay? And not only is it going super good, he was sold to an Egyptian named Potiphar. Now, Potiphar was the captain of the guard of Pharaoh. And if you don't know who Pharaoh is, Pharaoh was the guy who was the king of Egypt. Not only was the king of Egypt, he was like the emperor and the president. He was like one of the most powerful dudes in the ancient world at that time. So Joseph had it pretty good. And not only that, when you notice that God is blessing Joseph in Potiphar's home, that means everything that he touches is turning prosperous. That means that God is blessing Joseph. And in blessing Joseph, he's blessing Potiphar as well. And now I want to point something out to you. When God is moving in your life, when God is moving anywhere, people are going to notice. It's not something that is secret. It's not something that people are not going to notice, because God doesn't move quietly. God's big, God's loud, and he's exciting. And so when he starts blessing Potiphar's home, he notices this. And so if you're in Genesis chapter 39, read with me in verse 4. It says this: Joseph found favor in his eyes, Potiphar's eyes, and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care with Joseph in charge. He did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. That means this dude went to work, came home, and all he had to worry about was he having pancakes or pork chops. That's it. That's all he had to worry about, because Joseph took care of it all. And God was taking care of everything through Joseph. And so he knew that. Now, sounds great, right? Sounds really good. Joseph's the man. He's got it all laid out. He's taken care of. Well, no, not really. Because, see, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but in marriage there's a term called what's mine is yours and what's yours is mine. And see, Potiphar had a wife. And so Joseph, when he was sold into slavery, he was technically property. And so if he belonged to Potiphar, he belonged to Potiphar's wife. And what we need to notice here is that anything she tells him to do, he has to do. And now there's this overlying concept of if he disobeys, there's kind of some ramifications that have to go along with it. See, Joseph, remember, was at the head of the household. He's the cream of the crop. He's at the top, right? But if he disobeys, he could lose that status. Not only that, if he disobeys, he could wind up in prison. And if those two didn't work out, he could wind up dead. Like, remember last week when they were like, yo, he dead? No, he like dead. That's it. He could die. And so if he disobeys, that's a problem. Now, if you read the second half of verse 6, it says, and the Bible tells you this. If the Bible tells you this, it means that was it. And the Bible says in verse 6, he was handsome and he was well built. Now that's something Potiphar wouldn't want, but that's something his wife would want. And so she wanted him. And so what's Joseph supposed to do? In Genesis 39, in verse 8, we're going to keep going. This is what Joseph responded with. He said, he refused. Joseph said, with me in charge, he told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. That's a good boy. He knows his place. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you. So he's telling her flat out, yo, you're off limits. I don't want you, okay? Because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? Notice he's worried about his master, and he's worried about God. He is worried about what God's going to think. Never mind his title on this earth. He is worried about his salvation and what God's going to think about him. And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. Now, Joseph is in a tough spot. He's in a really tough spot. He can either respect and honor his master, and he can respect and honor and glorify God's holiness and expectation and avoid the temptation of sin, or he can submit to Potiphar's wife's request and do the no, and he just moves on. Well, the problem with that is that Joseph didn't really get a whole lot of time to think about it. You know, we don't have all the time in the world to solve this problem, because one day, Joseph finds himself cornered in a house, and she's there, and she's like, let's do this. And he's like, no. And here's the thing, guys. When you follow God, and when sin arises in temptation, and you're face to face with it, you have two options. You either run for the hills as fast as you can, and you don't have time to think, or you freeze like the deer in headlights, and you'd get run over. Well, Mr. Trackstar took off running. He ran so fast, so hard, he got out of there. But the problem is, when he ran, she grabbed his coat. And when she grabbed his coat came off, and she had it in her hands, and the boy left evidence. He left something behind. And so she had something, and she was done. She was done with him. So when Potiphar came home, she said, yo, look at this. And he was like, And then the next thing you know, my boy Jojo goes to jail. See, that's it. That's the end of this story, right? He went to jail. But the point of that is that Joseph didn't make his decision on what the outcome might look like. Joseph made his decision based on the fact that he wanted to honor God. He wasn't looking at, what is this going to benefit me? It's going to keep me out of trouble. It's going to do what my master's wife wants me to do, and we're going to be good. No, he was looking at what God was thinking. He was concerned with this direction instead of this one. And we have the same opportunities in life. We have those same opportunities to make those big decisions. We can do the right thing, or we can choose to do the thing that we can get away with. And I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm not saying that at all. Sometimes it's going to be really hard to tell. But God expects us to do the right thing every time. And the hard part of this, when you follow God, is you don't know what's going to happen next. You do not know what your further outcome is going to be. But I can guarantee that when Joseph was thrown in jail, and even beyond that, in his old age, I can guarantee he did not look back on his life and regret that decision. He did not regret that because he honored God with his choice. So the question is, what are you going to do? What are you going to do when you are faced with these situations? Well, going back to my exam, I went back and I told the professor. I went to his office and I told him. Now, most of you would say, man, you're a snitch. You're a narc. You just went and sold out the whole entire class. Maybe. And maybe I was a goody-goody. But if you look at it from the perspective of my professor, it wasn't like he could do anything. It wasn't like he could throw out the test and make a new one because it was too late by then. But what actually was happening there was I respected him enough to tell him what had happened. I respected his intelligence. I did not want him to look like a fool when it came time to everybody submitting it. And he honored the grades. I did not give myself a perfect score. I gave myself A-, because I didn't feel right taking full marks for something I didn't earn. But it meant something to him, and I know it meant something to God. And I got to tell you guys something. There's no such thing as a lose-lose situation. If you come down to the wire and it looks bad, it looks really bad. You have two choices in front of you, and both of them look bad. God's going to be in one of them. God is going to lead you out one way. It may not look pretty. It may hurt. It may cause sacrifices, and it may not be obvious, and it may be complicated. But God's going to lead you through that. I guarantee that. And so when we don't know what to do the next right thing. When you find yourself in situations like these, I got 3 steps for you to take, okay? The first one, slow down. Don't stop. Because we see what happens when you stop. You get run over. Do not stop, but slow down. The second thing you do is when you slow down, ask God what to do. Ask him. Ask God, God, what is this? Where am I going? What's going on? What do you want me to do? What's the right decision here? And then while you're waiting on God, he has put people in your life that can lead you. He has put people in your life that can pray with you. He has put teachers, parents, pastors. He has put people in your life that you can ask to pray with you, pray for you, and guide you. And guys, that's why we have connect groups. Because connect groups are the greatest thing that we have that keep us connected. I can talk to you all day long about the scriptures, and I can tell you all the advice. But until you're sitting there with somebody else who's going through the exact same thing, it makes more of an impact to know somebody else is struggling. And you can come alongside that person if you've already gone through that. And that's why connect groups are so great, because we can relate with one another. We can share, we can encourage, and we can grow, and we can pray with them. Because when we go back in order, we see God. So my challenge for you this week is if you come up with a situation where you have to make 2 decisions and you don't know which one it is, slow down, ask God, and find somebody you can trust to pray with you and pray for you. And I got to tell you guys something. Decisions are not made based on the outcomes. Decisions are made because you want to honor God. Decisions are made based on God's guidance and leadership and his perfect love. That is why we make those right decisions. That's why we make those perfect choices. And so I want to leave you guys with a scripture. It's found in Isaiah 30, verse 21, and it says this: whether you turn to the right or the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way. Walk in it. And that is my prayer for you guys. God will never let you go in a wrong direction. Even if you do take the wrong direction, God's not going to let you go down that path and say you're on your own. God will go with you. So you don't need to worry about that. You don't need to be afraid of that. Because God loves you so much that he will go into the dark places with you. So I want to pray with you guys as we close out. Father,